Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Power Up. I'm your host, Velia Chavez. And today, once again, I have with us our friend, Yesenia Olmedo, who is a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming back, Yesenia. We're excited to have you again. I know we're going to talk about a very important topic with, winter approaching us, the holidays. We know a lot of people go into a state of depression. And just before we got online, you were mentioning to me that there's two separate types of disorders that are related to the weather conditions, right? So explain to us the difference, if you will, a little bit.
Of course. So I always want to emphasize that if we could prevent, better than be chasing it once it's actually happened. So many people might be having mood changes occurring with weather. So that means like maybe it starts getting fall, winter, we start getting less sunlight. You start noticing your mood start changing. And some people have this seasonal pattern where year after year or most years you start noticing that trend. So my goal today is to kind of educate and kind of let you know kind of these changes and be aware of it before it happens so you can start doing these things to prevent that or to minimize the symptoms. So the two that we're going to discuss today, first of them is the winter blues. It sounds a little lighthearted, like, oh, it's just winter blues. So with that, it's maybe just a little sadness that you have on and off, with the winter or fall, because sometimes it starts in the fall and goes into winter. It gets better in the spring. Um, and maybe some days you don't feel like going out. Maybe you're just staying home. But it's not consistent. So maybe today I feel kind of crummy, tomorrow I feel fine and I'm hanging out with friends. So that's kind of the first set of like winter blues. The other one is called seasonal affective disorder. So with that one, it's actually a type of depression. It's a depression that lasts nearly every day, most days for about 2 weeks plus. With that one, you have symptoms of like depression, feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, sometimes suicidal ideation. So it's a more intense form of that depression that has that seasonal pattern. So you might notice it's coming in the fall. So those are kind of the two that we're going to be focusing on today.
Okay, great. So tell us, what can we do to prevent going into a depression or a depressive state?
Yeah, so if you notice that this is a trend that happens to you or with the weather changes you start, the first thing I would emphasize is self care. So, kind of figuring out different ways of getting that sunlight because that lack of, when you wake up, it's dark. When you're heading home, it's dark. So, there's very little time where you actually have much sun exposure unless you're going out in the middle of the day for a walk. So that would be the one thing I would emphasize. Get some physical activity in. If you're able to go outside for a walk, even better. So even 30 minutes in sunlight, better. And I'm not saying running, just going for a walk, just doing some kind of physical activity. If it's kind of a cloudy day, 2 hours. But I say whatever you can is better than nothing, right? So physical activity. Because there is that component that you get some vitamin D from the sun. Getting more foods that are enriched in vitamin D ahead of time before vitamin D levels start going
Right.
down is important. So like you got vitamin D fortified milk, that's a good option. Some of your green veggies. You could talk to primary care, nutritionists, different ways of kind of getting that vitamin D on board.
Okay. So is a deficiency in vitamin D typically correlated with depression?
Not necessarily, but low vitamin D can cause symptoms of like low energy, low mood. So I would say that one of the big things I would encourage before I make a diagnosis is kind of like, when was the last time we had some blood work done? Because I want to make sure your vitamin D is actually therapeutic. Sometimes depending on what other symptoms, thyroid. So I want to kind of have more of a holistic picture, kind of see everything that's going on. But there's some studies that indicate that vitamin D kind of helps with the here's where I come with my scientific, but just kind of like there's a serotonin based chemical in your brain.
Okay.
That you need a little bit of vitamin D to kind of help stimulate it and kind of keep it in balance. So when that winter hits, you're getting less vitamin D, less sunlight. You kind of have a little bit of lower serotonins. Okay. So that's kind of the little bit of scientific background behind that.
Perfect. So then the that's the first step. What is the second step to help prevent?
So we talked about sunlight, being physically active, um, getting lab work done. As far as more prevention strategies,
Right.
having a good source of connection.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of having those one to one.
Mm-hmm.
So hey, Velia, let's go to lunch,
Mm-hmm.
and actually commit to that. Because some people might find that as the time progresses, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be harder to stick with the
Mm-hmm.
commitments. But when you actually go out, you're like, oh, I don't know why I was dreading this. This is so much
Mm-hmm.
fun. Most
So force yourself to make those
Yeah,
outside
that
connections.
commitment, make sure that
Mm-hmm.
they are
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable, and listen to your body. It's like, if sometimes you need maybe smaller social situations,
Mm-hmm.
that's perfectly fine. Maybe one to ones is more your thing than, huge family parties.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've heard also, I don't know how true this is, but that there is a correlation between having physical contact with people, like if you have physical contact, getting hugs like from your loved ones, your partner, your mom, your kids, that has an impact on your overall well-being. Is there any
Mhm.
correlation to that, to where it's important to have that human contact?
Yeah, I feel like it varies. I think you're specifically talking about that physical touch.
Mm-hmm.
I think whatever makes that person feel more connected.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is a hug, if that is a meaningful conversation, if that's just kind of hanging out and being together,
Mm-hmm.
but just having that connection, that kind of source that you belong to something bigger than yourself and you're not by yourself, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's very important.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so when should we seek professional health if we try all these recommendations that you have given us, but none of it seems to be working?
Yeah. I would say kind of when you start noticing that trend earlier, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Just so they could kind of see what is your specific situation, see if we need to do some lab work, see if there's any life changes that are occurring that maybe we can strategize.
Mm-hmm.
Because along with kind of these seasonal affective disorder or winter blues, you could always start talk therapy sooner. So that's kind of counseling, kind of talking one to one. And what it does, it kind of helps um, kind of stop or minimize some of these negative thought processes we
Mm-hmm.
have, and kind of switch them to more positive ones.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could start that earlier, better, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's one. Your provider might make other recommendations. So there's something called light therapy.
Okay.
So because you're maybe, in here, there's no windows, very little sunlight. There's a light box.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has like 10,000 lux. So it's a certain amount of light that you're getting.
Does my ring count?
Let's see how many lux it has. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah. So, you know what? That is better than no sunlight, I would
Right.
say. And like 30, 60 minutes in the morning, just kind of getting a little bit of that light's going to
Mm-hmm.
help kind of keep you balanced. So that
Mm-hmm.
might be one of the recommendations. If we are to the point that, we are withdrawing, we have no joy. Like maybe
Mm-hmm.
we had some comfort foods that we like, but suddenly I don't have joy to eat. I don't have joy to hang out with anybody. There's no joy. I feel worthless. I feel all this. There's medications we could talk about. So that's just kind of a gist of what it would look like. But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, you need to go talk to a medical professional, kind of see what your situation is because everybody's different, Nella.
So let's say I call you. I say, "Hey, Yesenia, I think I'm having some depression, some winter blues. What would be the first step?" I'll call you, and I come in, have a consultation. How would that work?
Yeah, so if you are specifically looking to talk with me,
Mm-hmm.
you can reach out to me through my website, give me a phone call. There's many different ways to connect. I could get you in within the next week, so it's pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll do that initial consultation. It's about a 90-minute appointment, but we really kind of look at different parts of your life, and kind of look at, what are your current symptoms? How much are they impacting your day to day? And actually try to go back. Try to go back a few years, see if we notice a pattern. Because that's the one thing with seasonal affective disorder. There is a pattern. Maybe it's not consistent because maybe last year you were actually training for a marathon or you were actually
Mm-hmm.
outside a lot and you actually
Mm-hmm.
did really good. But maybe a couple years before you were struggling.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of try to find that pattern.
Okay. Also, I noticed that some people feel like it worsens around like Christmas, like something about the whole Christmassy music, the decorations, like it triggers them even worse.
Mm-hmm.
What why would that happen? Would that be something totally different, or is it all kind of connected?
I would say it could be connected. It could be different isolated cases. I think everybody's case is different, because we have to look at, well, what's going on. Has it been 2-3 months where you haven't had sunlight and it's that very classic seasonal affective disorder? Or is it that, maybe you had a loss of somebody you loved during that Christmas time, and that Christmas time is actually a little bit more of a sad time for you. Or sometimes Christmas comes with different stressors, and that's more of the winter blues where I'm like, okay, I gotta buy gifts for this, I have to do this, and you feel overwhelmed. And then maybe that's something we talk about, like, how can we kind of balance this out? Right.
Right. So then if I go on a consultation with you, we do the 90-minute evaluation and we determine, what's causing it, or would at that point will you recommend, like, okay, so you need to come see me every so often, or here's some medication to make it through the winter, or how does that treatment work?
So as far as follow-up, probably if you hadn't had lab work in a bit, I might recommend starting there first, just to make sure, medically speaking, everything's balanced. And if everything's balanced, then we will discuss medication depending on the severity. So if we're doing medication, I initially want to follow up a lot more closely with you, because we always start lowest dose of medication, right? I'm not going to start you on the max dose of that, because that comes with more side effects. You're going to feel kind of crummy. So we want to ease you in and kind of find what's that sweet dose of medication for you. So initially we'd be following up every 4 weeks or so, just to see how you're doing. I do a little bit of brief supportive therapy in there. So I might talk about, like, hey, well, is there anything we can delegate? I see you're busy cooking and doing this. Can you delegate some of this to some of your older kids?
Yeah.
Can we talk about sleep hygiene? Can we talk about light therapy? If I do kind of find, like, hey, we need a little bit more specialized therapy, I might make recommendations, like, hey, there's these providers, they have openings, so I'll do the medication piece, and they'll focus more on the therapy piece. So kind of figure out what would work best for you and what actually makes sense for your life, right?
Correct. Thank you for answering that question. So another question that I have that just popped up, so if you're not prepared to answer this, no worries, but do women who are going through menopause, let's say, do they tend to have a more severe reaction? Maybe they've never had a problem during the winter, but now that they're going through all these hormonal changes, can that have an impact where all of a sudden now they're seeing the winter blues?
I think that's a little trickier to answer. I could try my best. But, with the seasonal affective, we're looking for those patterns. So if you haven't had those patterns before, I think it'd be harder to make that diagnosis today of seasonal affective disorder. But I have had many women who, have perimenopausal symptoms, who have some fluctuations. And, we want you to feel better.
Right.
So I'm not going to say, oh, no medication because it's not seasonal affective. But I'm like, hey, maybe you're more irritable. Maybe you're more sad. It could just be depression. It could be a combination, but you're here to get help because you want to feel better. So we're going to help you and find the right medication for you.
Exactly. Well, that's great information, Yesenia. I appreciate you coming out, and we look forward to hearing more advice from you. So where can people call you if they want to schedule an appointment with you?
So you can call me at 913-344 4003. You could check out my website, Buena Vida Health.org.
BuenaVidaHealth.org. Okay.
And then there's kind of a couple of different ways to reach out through there. You can just put a request for a telephone consultation. I usually like to talk to everybody just to make sure we're a good fit. And those are kind of the best ways to go.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much once again. We'll be having Yesenia again. So if there's a specific topic about mental health that you would like for us to discuss, feel free to message me, inbox me, and I'll definitely make sure we answer your questions on our next podcast. Anything you want to add before we say goodbye?
I feel like there's so much to add, but I think we covered prevention is key. Whenever you're noticing any changes, reach out as soon as you can, even if you're not really sure. I'm always willing to kind of find you some resources or just help you before anything kind of escalates. I think that's the key. Prevention is the key to everything.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, thank you all for tuning in today to The Power Up with your host, Felia Chavez. We look forward to seeing you next time. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to my channel. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'll try to keep it short because it's 10:30 now. You had to say